Rockies breaking down by the numbers how much the Rockies offense struggled. And with basically the same offense coming back next year, can we expect much to change?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 27th day of December in the year 2022. I am your Rockies fan extraordinaire, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, well, you are in the right spot, because that's what we do around here, is talk about the purple pinstripes each and every day. Well, a little bit less now during the off season, but hey, everyone's got an off season, and that's all right. I am your Rockies fan extraordinaire, Paul Holden. Been following this team my entire life and bringing you your daily Rockies talk for about two and a half seasons now. And we've been navigating the offseason together, continuing to kind of look at the philosophical approach of the Rockies, I suppose, and just kind of the bigger picture topic ideas. And one of the things, a lot of people, I think, when they think Rockies and they think and especially the issues, they'll talk about pitching and bullpen and that stuff. And very big concern. The bullpen last year might have been the weakest part of the Rockies game, just because the Rockies were strong in batting average and a couple of other offensive statistics. But to be frank, for next year, especially, I'm really worried about the offense. This is a team that that hasn't changed much. Of course, they've added Nolan Jones. They've added a couple of smaller moves, but by missing out on some of the big 1-year deals that were in free agency, Joey Gallo, for example, Cody Bellinger, for example. Those bats and the possibility they could add to this offense were disappointing to let go, because I wanted to bring up this tweet, and we're also going to head over to Purple Row, but this is from at J Cuda, I think, at JAYCUDA. Each MLB team's offensive league rankings in 2022 in all of the different bases occupied scenarios. So this is where the Rockies rank compared to the rest of the league when it comes to their rankings with runners in scoring position. And the Rockies just were simply not that great when it comes to runners in scoring position, especially bases loaded. And this is a massive issue. The Rockies can't be this bad with bases loaded. The Rockies ranked 25th in plate appearances with bases loaded, 29th in runs scored and bases loaded, 28th in hits, 29th in home runs, which is 0, by the way. The Rockies hit 0 grand slams, 18th in balls with the bases loaded, or walks with the bases loaded, 26th in batting average with the bases loaded, 25th with the an on-base percentage, 28th with slugging percentage, and 26th in OPS. This is your maximum run scoring potential here when it comes to runners in scoring position. The Rockies can't be that far down in all of those advanced metrics. And the only thing that really shines for the Rockies when you kind of look at it is the Rockies hit for average last year, especially when, no matter the situation, outside of bases loaded. The Rockies were top 11, or I'm sorry, at least top 14 or better in all other scenarios with runners in scoring position. 6th in batting average with nobody on, 8th in batting average with runner on first, 11th in batting average with a runner on first and second, 11th in batting average with a runner on second, 3rd in batting average with a runner on third, 14th with the runner on the corners at first and third, 9th with the runners on second and third, but then plummeting. I mean, absolutely falling off of the table with the bases loaded to 26th. I don't know if this is a too aggressive approach. I don't know if this is the Rockies being too swing heavy and not being able to get on base, but you can't be that good in other situations. And then in the most critical situation, when you have ducks on the pond, when you have runners on, you have to capitalize, especially if you're in a no out to one out situation. You can't be that good in terms of hitting for average, and batting average is a pretty good one there because that means, at least in those other situations, the Rockies were more successful in driving in runs. But when the Ducks are there, when the chips are on the table, when it's time to be clutch, how many times have we talked this offseason? The Rockies were not clutch in the biggest moment, which is bases loaded. Especially the Rockies. You got to be able to punish bad teams that come in and let you load the bases up, especially at home and in environments that you are. The big issues, especially with this, when you look at those bases loaded numbers, big part of why you're not hitting well on the road. A big part of why you're not scoring on the road. You might be hitting, but when it comes to the big clutch hits, driving things together, it is something that the Rockies cannot be this bad at. I mean, these numbers are astounding. I mean, the Rockies were worse than just about everyone. The Orioles might have been roughly the same with runners and bases loaded situation. But where do you think the Astros ranked with the bases loaded? 10th in plate appearances, 6th in runs, 3rd in hits, 2nd in home runs, 5th in walks, 2nd in batting average, 2nd in OBP, 1st in slugging, and 1st in OPS. That's how you win the World Series. That's when you're given opportunities to score, you dominate. You are crushing. When you are given maximum run potential with having the bases loaded, good teams, great offenses, World Series caliber teams get the job done and clear the bases. Let's dive into the live chat here and answer some questions. Talk a little bit more about this Rockies offense and see what Purple Row has to say about this Rockies bases loaded offense here. And we'll take a look at some of the other numbers for the Rockies as well in just a moment. But before we do that, got to tell you about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting info and stats, news, and analysis. That's if you want to get in on this baseball betting already, you absolutely can at betonline.net. And lots of football action going on. We got the big college football playoffs, we got bowl season going on, and of course the NFL season is marching its way towards the playoffs. So if you want to get in on the NFL action, you can find the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to hockey, golf. They got it all at betonline.net. They even got more sports podcasts. If you can't get just your fill here on the Locked On Podcast Network, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. You can head to the website. That's betonline.net today, or use your mobile device to learn more at BetOnline, where the game starts. We are talking about the Rockies offense. We're talking about how they fared with runners on base. And there's some moments where the Rockies were strong on offense, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's dive into the live chat here and start talking to our Rockies fans in the live chat. Blasting Bagel and Joel DeGrace are here. Joel DeGrace says, what do you think of the chances are of Grichuk getting back to 30 home runs? And this kind of goes in with Blasting Bagel's comment here is, as much as I like Daza, we need a power hitter at Coors, not a guy who will hit for average. Those kind of go hand in hand, I guess, in a way. Randall Grichuk was brought over to hit home runs and hit the ball in the air. Can he get back to 30 home runs? Can he do that? I think the answer should be yes. I really hope with a new hitting coach, it's a new and a hitting coach that comes from outside of the organization as well. One of the rare things, and one of the interesting wrinkles to watch this season for the Rockies is the Rockies went outside the organization to bring in Bam Bam, to bring in the Yankees hitting coach. And the Yankees pretty darn good when it comes to offense. When we're looking at just kind of our numbers and themes today, the Yankees only struggled with a runner on second. Outside of that, the Yankees were first in scoring runs with the bases empty and the bases loaded, first in home runs with the bases empty, second with runners on second and first, third with runner on third, first with runners on second and third, and first with the bases loaded. Home run numbers are going to matter tremendously for the Colorado Rockies. This is a team that needs to put the ball over the wall lots more frequently. This is exactly the type of stuff you're looking for. So when you're looking at this at some of the stuff for the Yankees' success, that's encouraging. The Yankees, on top of that, were in certain situations led baseball in drawing walks, were top 5 in certain runners on base situations, in on base percentage, slugging, OPS, in multiple categories. They are top 5 in OPS for the Yankees were last season with the bases empty, a runner on first, runner on third, and bases loaded. They were in the top 10 in OPS with runners on second and third and runners on the corners. And this is slugging percentage, basically the same type of deal. The Yankees really only struggled with runner in certain with runner on second and in some areas with just a runner on third. But when you look at this chart, there's a whole lot of green coming from the Yankee side. So can this new coach bring the Rockies, a player like Randal Grichuk? Can he work on his swing and help get him into that 30 home run category? Sure. I think that could be possible, especially when you look at what Grichuk is the whole philosophy and the whole mindset of bringing Randal Grichuk over to the Rockies. However, he's only hit 30 home runs once in his career, Randal Grichuk, and he did it in 2019. Randal Grichuk sitting at 25 home runs. It might be a little bit more realistic. That's 6 more home runs on the year for Grichuk as opposed to adding 11 home runs. But even that would signal a nice improvement for the Rockies. Baseball Reference is projecting Grichuk to only get that 19 home runs again. So we'll have to see. But the thing is, I just think we saw a year of Randal Grichuk. Randal Grichuk's been in the league a bit. We kind of know the tendencies with Grichuk. We've seen it in Toronto. So by sitting there and saying, we're hoping Grichuk is going to bounce back and be part of our home run production versus going out and signing a home run power bat for your outfield isn't going to fix things. Is just a hitting coach going to be enough to turn this offense around for the Rockies? I don't think so. I don't think this is going to be a strong offense unless we really see young guys, especially Eleris Montero, break out into a power bat. This offense is going to be mostly the same here. I mean, the big exception for the Colorado Rockies and in terms of offensive production and being better as an offense next year will come down to Chris Bryant. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. It is a blast hosting this podcast. It's a blast here hosting it live on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can join the live chat just like Joel DeGrace, Blasting Bagel, and I see Furious MMO there. Joel DeGrace says, if Bryant, Crone, and maybe Chuck can settle into a rhythm, I'd honestly feel pretty good about our new hitting coach. I think we could have 3 strong bags and then some good grinding batters. That's the Rockies getting great offense or good offense from those players, and maybe throw in your McMahon or Rogers in terms of, hey, if they start hitting the ball out of the yard a little bit more than we thought, huge. But the big X factor in what is going to make a difference for this Rockies offense, it will be Chris Bryant. We know the small sample size we saw of Chris Bryant. The Rockies offense is better with him in it. The Rockies generate more runs. The Rockies generate more offense. The Rockies have a deeper threat in the lineup. And they need Chris Bryant next year, especially on offense. The defense or whatever, that's not going to be what we're talking about with Chris Bryant. They need Chris Bryant to come out and bat 280 and hit 25 plus home runs. That is what they need from Chris Bryant at the minimum. They need Chris Bryant to lead this offense. We can't sit here and have CJ Cron be the only big threat in the Rockies lineup. We mentioned Charlie Blackmon as well, maybe in that full DH role, but we know where Charlie's at as well. Charlie swung the bat pretty well. Charlie wasn't necessarily great on offense, but he wasn't bad, and he still had a pretty darn good line to finish the season. But the big thing, the big change that will come with the Rockies in their offense being better this year, it's not going to just be because of the hitting coach. It's not going to just, and it's certainly not due to add additions to the Rockies offense through free agency. Chris Bryant is the big thing, I think, not only to the Rockies, we've heard them say it, but it's clear that he is the key missing link to this Rockies offense. And a reminder, this is a guy that in 160 plate appearances had 49 home runs, 49 hits, 5 of them home runs, none of them at Coors Field, with a batting average of 306, 14 RBIs, and finishing the rest of his line at 376 OBP, slugging a 475, an OPS of 851, and an OPS plus of 127. Those are really solid numbers. I know that's not much. I know that's only 160 at bats, and it's not very many games. But inject that into the Rockies offense, and you're scoring more runs. Give Chris Bryant a full season. He's going to have multi-home run games at Coors Field. He's going to do that, hopefully, because he has to stay healthy and he has to stay on the field to do so. But just looking at power numbers or something that's possible, Chris Bryant, has hit 26 home runs, 39 home runs, 29 home runs, 13 home runs, 31 home runs, 4 home runs in the pandemic, and 25 in 2021. That is what the Rockies need. They need this career 279 hitter and this guy that's hit 172 home runs. He is going to be the biggest change to the Rockies offense next year, in addition to Eleris Montero. If Eleris Montero can break out onto the scene, the Rockies are going to have a bigger power bat. Montero, he was able, it wasn't much, but when he hit the ball and when he was driving, when he hit his home runs, this was a strong performance. 6 home runs for Montero and 176 at bats. And so, he's not, it wasn't as strong in a similar amount of sample size as Chris Bryant, but he still was showing that the power, the RBI generation is part of his game. I'm really excited to see these two in the lineup together. And of course, I'm excited to see what Chris or CJ Cron can do, but we saw the steep decline in CJ Cron. And we saw last year what happens when you say, CJ Cron is our guy. CJ Cron is our offensive threat. It's not much. I really think that the Rockies' big change, the big X factor, and how they get better, especially with runners in scoring position, is getting Chris Bryant back, and then seeing what comes of players like Eleris Montero and the core 4 here. Let's take a question from let's take 2 things here from a couple of things from the live chat here. Joel DeGray says, I finally figured it out. Grichuk wears his socks higher and higher the longer his home run droughts last. That's why they were up to his thighs. That's a pretty good one there, Joel. Furious MMO says, the thing is, when the Rockies are in a slump, they need to figure out how to get out of it faster. And yeah, that's a tough one. The Rockies, historically, streaky team, and their bad streaks last year were really bad. And I mean, their bad streaks have ruined seasons, have ruined great runs, and get in the way of often great starts for the Rockies. The Rockies have to figure out how to play good baseball in the second and third months of the year. to keep themselves competitive here. But you're that's a good point, Furious. It's seems to be this team does have an issue with breaking slumps and avoiding streakiness with it here. And Blasting Bagel says, I don't quite understand why we signed McMahon when we have so many prospects waiting to come up that play the corners. It's a conversation we had a bit in. It's one you can, if you missed our or didn't check out our podcast with Lindsey Crosby, we kind of talk about that because I talk about Montero being a part of this offense that I'm excited about, but where does he really fit into this team? And because Ryan McMahon is one of those players that is in the way, and if they're turning young, is Ryan McMahon really part of the future plan, or is that deal and that commitment in those years something the Rockies might try to turn into a trade? I still find that to be unlikely, but Montero should be getting a lot of time. How they do that, we're going to have to find out. And the DH is going to be a really, really interesting position for the Rockies next year. Furious MMO says, that's what bugged me last year was we had a 5-win streak going into the All-Star break and came out losing 8 of the next 10, which made that winning streak obsolete. Yep. I mean, it's Rockies were every time they took a step forward last year, they took a step back, whether it be in blown performances or lack of clutch ability or lack of road hitting. But then the Rockies would, I mean, we thought that the Rockies, I thought especially the Rockies were going to go into LA at the end of the year and get smoked. And they did. They didn't. They played really well. And same with really that last California road trip, but as bad as the last month of the season was going at a moment and could have gone, it was its streakiness is real with the Rockies here. And we'll take the last question here from the live chat. Blasting Bagel says, do you think that they signed Cron for longer, or do they think you trade him? No, there's just CJ Cron has been a great addition to the Rockies. CJ Cron should have been a Rocky instead of Daniel Murphy and Ian Desmond, and it could have been way different. But CJ Cron blocks your DH, he blocks your first base. There's just way too many young guys you turn to or wanting to turn to. And CJ Cron just simply isn't going to be part of that equation long term. The best thing for the Rockies to do, especially if CJ Cron is putting the ball over the wall next year, is trade him at the deadline for some bullpen depth and pitching prospects. I really think that's the move. I really think that is the best thing there. And as unfortunate as it is, but because CJ Cron has been a solid add for the Rockies, he's a good CJ Cron was a good move. Getting CJ Cron, having him play as long as he's had for the Rockies is a good move. But really, the Rockies should have traded him last year. Rockies should have traded him when he was an all-star, would have traded him when his stock was at an all-time high before he cooled off in the second half. So, so there was a lot of things that we talked about here today, but the most important thing is the Rockies were not good with runners on base. And if you want to be in the playoffs, if you want to compete with the best, you have to be able to be solid with runners in scoring position. And when you look at this chart here, in case you're curious, the Dodgers, probably the best overall team in baseball when it comes to driving in runs and being successful with runners in scoring position. Teams that did well are green across the board in at JAYCUDA's graph here of each MLB team's offensive league rankings in 2022. The Dodgers were probably when you look at this, the best team in baseball with runners in scoring position. The Yankees were really good. The Cardinals were really good. The Blue Jays were really good. The Astros were really good. The Mets were really good. What do all those teams have in common? Playoff teams. Mets were the Braves, another one. When you're the Rockies and you're the Rockies weren't the worst team with runners in scoring position. They were just one of the worst teams. You can't do that. You can't be that if you're the Colorado Rockies. Folks, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much to Furious MMO, Blasting Bagel, and Joel DeGrace for being in the live chat today and asking your Rockies questions. You can subscribe to the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, be part of the show, and ask your question and help in the show by subscribing to Locked On Rockies on YouTube. You can also find us on your favorite streaming service. Just search Locked On Rockies, and you'll be taken to where you need to go. You can find me at Paul Holden 33. You can find the show at LO Rockies on Twitter, right here on YouTube. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day. Why don't you go make the Locked On Sports Today podcast your second listen of the day and stay up to date with all things Colorado sports with the Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, and Locked On Nuggets podcast. And until next time, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.